morning, everyone. Welcome to the 10:30 track here in room 1004. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Michael Fienen, and the title of his presentation is Acceptable Application of Analytics for Your Academic Areas. Mr. Fienen is the former director of web marketing for Pittsburgh State University and is currently the CTO of New Cloud LLC and the senior developer at Exclude. Michael has a decade of background in the challenges faced by web developers in higher ed, and he continues to seek out solutions to help simplify and improve the processes people use in that space. His advice: do less better, data is life, and learn to say no.
That is the dry version of me. I've been doing web work for a fairly good while. I left Pitt State back in 2012 and partnered up with some buddies of mine from some universities over on the East Coast. We started New Cloud, where we do interactive campus maps. Not here to do sales pitches, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But I also work for Aquint. They're based in Boston. Has anybody ever worked for Aquint or Vitamin Talent by chance? I see a nod. We're like a talent staffing firm working with digital marketers and designers and all of this, and putting you with Microsoft and Amazon and big companies, small companies, agencies, things like that. So it's a good time. I enjoy it. It's fun. And I love the fact that I still get to come out and talk at events like this. I do high ed web pretty regularly and talk there. I did a Google Tag Manager talk there. Did anybody go to high ed web last year? Yeah. I did a Tag Manager talk there, and this is kind of an evolution of that talk. So while I will be talking about analytics today, I'm also going to be talking a lot about Tag Manager because for me, that's sort of the juice that really gets that working the way I think it needs to. So a lot of the examples, a lot of the work is going to be done in context of that. Don't worry, I'm going to explain how all that works as well. I found out there is no inter-session break halfway through, which gives me 15 more minutes, which I hope will serve you well, because I could talk about analytics literally all day. And so even with 2 hours, while it's certainly better than 45 minutes, there's a lot to cram in there. And so I want to make sure, for starters, that we cover what you guys need to know about, and that I don't waste a lot of time on stuff that you don't. So for starters, this is kind of the rough outline. I'm going to bounce around. It's how I work, basically. I'm going to do this very free form. I've got a lot of examples. I do have a demo site that I'll link you to here in a second where I'll be pulling a lot of this from. The first thing, though, I want to just kind of get a feel for. Everybody in here knows what Google Analytics is. Yes, everybody has it on their site, I assume. You can probably read a basic report. Is that a fair statement? You could tell me right now what the most visited page on your site is. Yes? Okay. Can you tell me if that page is performing well? Do you know if I say, is that top page performing well? Do you know what I would want to see based on that? Is anybody here doing any kind of event tracking on their sites? Some event tracking, a few of you. Are you using custom dashboards? Custom reporting? Okay. So here's the thing. When it comes to analytics, one of the most important things that happens with Google Analytics doesn't happen in the software. And so I want to apologize to those of you who do know a little bit more than the rest, because I will at least try to speed through some of these basics just to get them out of the way. And please, absolutely stop me at any point. If I have gone over something too quickly, if there's something you want to see more of, or if you just have a question about what we just reviewed, please let me know. I want this to go back and forth as much as humanly possible. I will have time at the end as well. Be thinking as we're going. Of course, everybody's got a device in front of them. Feel free to follow along on your own accounts if you would like, and look at the things that I'm showing you. Don't if you don't want to. Take notes. Draw screenshots. I don't care. Whatever helps you learn here and helps you walk away with something useful. And that's what I would like everybody in here to focus on before I'm done is find the one thing that you can walk out of this session with and go back to your university and do and implement. Don't try to do everything I talk about, because you're not going to remember all of it in enough detail. It's just the way things work. You've got, what, 2 more sessions today, 3 if you don't go to the workshop. You've got all day tomorrow. You're going to learn a lot while you're here. So don't try to overload yourself. Grab that one thing and run with that as far as you can. And then at the end, my hope is 15, 20 minutes. Think about these problems that you have, and let's look at them in real time and try to figure out, okay, you want to know X. Let's build the report to do that. Let's look at how you know X, basically. Okay, so that's a little bit there. I've got a lot of notes here too that I'm going to be going back and forth on. I told you this is of course Google Analytics. I'm going to be talking about Tag Manager. Assuming things run on time, I am going to touch on Google Optimize a little bit. Is anybody in here using Optimize yet? Has anybody signed up? Fantastic tool. And I will mention that once you have kind of put a bow on all this and you're comfortable with it yourself, start looking into Data Studio. I'm not going to get into it at all in this workshop, but it is the natural evolution of these 3 tools, and taking all of this information and producing something really digestible for whomever it is that you're talking to. So I mentioned the important work for analytics doesn't start inside the tool. It starts right here. It starts with thinking about, I love all the acronyms, you know, the KPIs, OKRs. Does everybody know what an OKR is? That's kind of the newer kid on the block for objectives and key results. It's basically rebranded KPIs. I don't really know why we need 2 different acronyms. It's the idea of everybody loves analytics because they like seeing what their site's doing, and that's cool. It's neat to know what your top performing page is. It's neat seeing something, you know, trending in a way that you didn't expect it to. I always get a kick out of, because it's very predictive of things, when you look at analytics, especially for a university, the shark fin. Everybody's familiar with the shark fin. If you look at a month's worth of web traffic, you get this peak on Monday that drops off to the weekend and valley. It's a very predictive element, and it's neat to see that working well, because it's kind of like listening to a car motor. When you've got that rhythm, you know things are working right. The reality is it doesn't matter. What matters is chasing context, not numbers. Because individually, I can show you 1 million reports, but single dimension reports are absolutely useless to you. They will never do you any good as a web developer. It's all about putting context to those numbers. If I know your homepage gets 250,000 hits a month, so what? If I look at your page and it's getting 250,000 hits a month, but it has an 80% bounce rate, that's a crappy page. And most homepages are that way, especially in higher ed, and I get that. But that's the thing, is understanding that sometimes one high number doesn't give you anywhere near the whole picture. And so it's important to start thinking about what matters. What are you measuring, for whom, and why? So you think about that and you go to the people. So give me a breakdown in here. Who do we have? Web developers, or something very similar to a web developer. Web marketers or marketing directors. Other. What? Define other for me. Give me an idea. You had your hand raised. Other. What is other?
Well, I'm marketing, but I also am just the manager of helping all these users. And so part of my job is not only troubleshooting their problems for them, helping them with what's going on with their site, but making sure that they're thinking of all these things. And analytics is one of these areas where we set it up that nobody cares about analytics until they do. And then it's a matter of being a Svengali of knowing what they're going to be asking for, so that you're already measuring it, because nobody likes to hear, oh yeah, we can measure that. We'll start now, and it comes back 6 months from now.
Right. Yeah. So part of that discussion always extends to this idea of setting up the meetings and finding out what is important to the people that you're helping. If your biology department, for instance, is the top exit point on your site, you may care, the marketing person may care, but does the biology department care? And if you need to convince them of that, sit down, talk to them, explain. There is as much, because analytics, here's the thing, I love numbers. I love numbers because numbers are immutable for the most part. You can translate them in different ways, but one hit is one hit. That stuff is easy. The hardest part about analytics is the fact that analytics is striving to tell you about a people problem, a behavioral and interaction problem. And so you're trying to translate this sort of fuzzy people issue into numbers. And that takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. And that's why I'm really, really big on making sure that before you set up filters and built reports and determine what you think is important, make sure you spend a lot of time with these people who are going to be reading your reports, looking at dashboards, whatever the case may be. I can't tell you the number of times I have talked to people at conferences, on Facebook, over chats, and they're frustrated because they keep going back to their marketing director with a report and they keep saying, no, this isn't what I'm looking for. Well, what do you want? They don't know. Sit down and help them figure it out. Because that's going to save you a lot of time on the tail end then, because then you can focus on writing the things for your analytics reports that will get you to where you need to be. Good example. Let's, and I'll show an actual version of this here in a little bit, but think about when you're talking about like a KPI or something, you know, the easy one is I want more. I want more people doing something, and that's a good one. That's easy, it's straightforward. But one thing a lot of universities don't think about is value. Now, value can be relative. You could say this interaction has a value of 10. 10 what? Doesn't matter. 10 whatever you want it to be. But it can come down to money. And every university is in a position right now that money kind of is being watched, right? Value is important, and it's becoming more important every year that we go through these cycles. So one example I kind of tell people is, not kind of tell people, I do tell people. I want you to think about the value of a student to your university. Let's use a very simple number. And this example is way, way simplified. It takes a lot more work to really grind this down, but it'll give you the picture. Let's say one student is worth $50,000 to you, right? That student over 4 years, some of you may charge way more than that. I don't know. I'm from a small town in Kansas. We trade corn and pigs for college educations there. $50,000 student, right? Let's say, how does that math work? Hold on. This is how notes work. Okay, the $50,000, and then let's say for every one student that you accept, you get 10 applications, right? What does that make one application worth? You didn't know you were coming to math class, did you? Yeah, $5,000. Again, fuzzy, but that's the basic principle behind it. One application's worth $5,000. Now, let's say that for every one application that you get 100 requests for information to a given department. If you get 100 requests for information, that makes every request for information worth $50. As you start getting into goal funnels with Google Analytics and trying to figure out what are our key performance indicators, we can plug that $50 number into a goal funnel and say, we want people to request information, and every one of those requests is basically worth $50 to us, as long as the math holds up. That may change with trends and things like that, and you have to constantly be adjusting those things. And like I say, this is a super simplified version because obviously that value is spread out amongst a lot more than simply requesting information. But you can get to those numbers that then tell you, if I visit as a mapping company, this is a big thing to us because our virtual tours and our interactive maps are one of the initial touch points for prospective students. And so being able to translate map views into value for the university so that they know the money they spend with us is worth it, those kinds of KPIs are extremely important to us. To be able to sit down and say, well, based on how much one student pays at your school, every time one of them looks at your map, it's basically worth $3 to you. That lets you know, is what you're doing effective? We don't cost $50,000 as a product. But if we did, and you ran that math and found out, well, you're only technically making $20,000 from the map, you might rethink how that money's being spent. And can you do something that gets more value out of those page views? that's where we start getting into analytics and figuring out what's valuable, what can we look at, and how can we extract that really good information to make decisions with. Okay, so the basic stuff and basic reports. So before I go too far, this is the site I've set up, WPCampus2017.fienen.com. I apologize, my name is short but very hard to spell because I'm German. It's a garbage site. It looks terrible. It's using a canned WordPress theme, but I threw it up there. Most of the stuff I'll be showing you is derived from a lot of test data that I've just kind of crammed into that over the last couple of weeks here. So if you want to go look at it, great. Click around, hit anything, fill out forms. You won't hurt anything. You won't change anything, but it will populate some data into the site. Okay, we saw what you knew. Before we get to theme stuff, no, let's go to theme stuff. This is the WordPress portion of the conversation because I am at a WordPress conference, right? Now this, I'm using Tag Manager as my example. You can use normal analytics in this, it's fine. I apologize, so I walk back and forth a lot. It's just my nature. So this is my functions.php file. Now there are a dozen ways to do this, and my way is not necessarily right or wrong, it's just a way. And there are plugins that will do this as well. I personally am not a fan of using plugins for things that I can do in code because I like keeping that overhead light. And this is incredibly simple. So in this case, I set up my ID, and it's the Tag Manager ID, but it could just as easily be your analytics ID. I set up a function, include GTM body, and then I just have it spit out my chunk of HTML. That is my tracking code. Then I do a second function. This one's for the head, because with Tag Manager, there is an iframe include that you can use as well. And so I like making sure I have both of those just in case. So in this case, it's the header, same basic stuff, just a little bit different markup. And then I add an action there at the very bottom to bind that to the WordPress head include. I give it a priority of 0, so it's the first thing it renders, so it's as high up in the head as I can get it without, modifying my actual header file. And now my stuff is included in my theme. I do one other deal because the body include fires separately. I want it right inside my body tag, so I do add that function into the header file. But that's the long and short of it. That's how I get my Tag Manager or analytics onto a WordPress theme. Yeah.
You might get this later, but what is Tag Manager different than using?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's I will go through that in depth. Trust me. It's basically a way of telling analytics what to do. You can do way more with it than that, but it's a really good way of proxying stuff that we used to write a lot of code to do. We don't have to write code to do it anymore. It makes it real nice. Yeah.
I'm not a Tag Manager, but just in general, do you also have Google Analytics on the page, or is this instead of?
Instead of, it takes the place. So if you've got your normal analytics include, what you would do is basically swap. Okay. And I'll show you how that works here in just a little bit in terms of Tag Manager taking the place of analytics. And they can coexist as well. That's fine. But I think it'll make good sense once we get there. Yeah, go ahead.
Having this in the head and body, is it not then required to play?
No. Google automatically checks to dedupe it. This is, and the head, or rather the body include, if you notice, is wrapped in a no script, so that it only includes, it's just, it's the fallback. It's there just in case JavaScript doesn't work. I'm a big fan of making sure things degrade gracefully, or as gracefully as I can manage, and do progressive enhancement elsewhere. So I like that redundancy. You don't have to include the iframe piece of it, though, especially if your site would just completely break without JavaScript to begin with. That's a whole other issue. I won't go into the accessibility and stuff of that, but yeah, the important one is this guy. I also, just for argument's sake, and this will come up a little bit later, this first line I added in line 19, this data layer, setting it to an array if it's not already set. The data layer is a transport variable that stores information for Tag Manager and gets it in there, so it can be used to take information that you collect and give it to Tag Manager to do stuff with. So I just initialize it when I start everything up. Okay, yeah, I say I had one more thought.
I don't know if we're gonna talk about this later, but how does this tie in as do you use a child theme, and then how does it tie in like to all that side?
Yeah, so in my case, I am using a child theme. I literally went to the theme repo and just said, give me a theme that is educational. And I found this university hub, and I made a child theme based off of it. For multi-site, it depends. So it's as far as Tag Manager cares, it's pretty much like normal Google Analytics. So that's a good branching question here. So how many sites are people responsible for managing in here? Just throw out a number. How many sites do you care for?
450.
450? That's individual domains?
No, multi-site off of one
Okay.
domain.
We have 6 multi-site instances.
Okay.
Couple like 500.
Using subdomains or paths?
Most use subdomains.
Okay.
Other use 1 or 2 use paths.
Okay. So the answer to the question comes down to however you handle your analytics for these setups is basically how you will handle it in Tag Manager. In that you can use, just like you can use one analytics property across many sites, and then you set up, the site linker and sharing of cookies and whatnot, depending on if you want those sites to not do things like self-refer, or if you want to keep them separate. This is one of those things where there's, a dozen ways to skin a cat kind of deal. At Aquent, we have not only our core site, aquent.com, but we've got aquent.fr, aquent.co.jp, aquent.com.au, aquent.co.uk, and subdomains beyond those. And they're all one site, though. That's the thing. It's one site that's multilingual. So and you'll see some examples of this here in a few. When we work with views, the views are what everybody knows what a view is, I hope, mostly, maybe. We have views that are all inclusive. So we end up with one view that literally shows all of those sites crammed together, and then we use views to break them up into individuals. So to do multiple sites, you could do it through that same process, or you could do like we do with Vitamin Talent. Vitamin Talent's a whole other site. We don't want that crammed in with the Aquent traffic, so we have a separate property for it. There is a level of configuration that has to go for 600 sites. Ouch. Are they? You said they were subdomained or no?
Oh, no, so I would say 400 are subdirectories.
Okay.
And I would say maybe 20 to 30 subdomains. So it's doable for subdomains, and that's something I definitely want to be able to do. Is I've got individual Google Analytics accounts for each subdomain, but the core domain.edu is all off of one Google Analytics code for all the subdirectories.
You'll love what I'll talk about here in a little bit.
Excellent.
I've got a solution just for you. I came prepared. So with views, since I mentioned that, there are 3 views everybody should have, 2 views everybody should have, and a third if you want it. You should always have your master view. This is the view that collects everything. You have this. It's when you start up a property and create your first account, you have this all website data view. Everybody should have that. You should also have a copy of that is raw, that you never, ever touch with anything. That is sort of your litmus test for if you ever need to go back and confirm what something was or wasn't, you need that raw data to always be intact. And so make an extra view that you just, I literally label mine, all website data raw, and don't ever look at it because I don't need it. But it's good if we ever did. One of our guys, he puts like, do not edit on it or something like that. Whatever you need to do to make sure you don't touch it. The third, and I like flying by the seat of my pants a lot, so I don't use this very often, but having a testing view. When I start talking about things like filters and goals and things like this, it can be good to have a view that you just test those things on. So again, you don't pollute or otherwise screw up data. I actually have one example that I didn't use a testing view for, and so I don't have a good example of it now because as I was preparing to come in here, I noticed my reports were not looking the way I expected them to for that particular filter. And it was a weird fluke of a thing, but it's that's what can happen. And if you don't pay attention to it, if you set something up, because one of the analytics problems, right, is setting something up and then thinking, well, I got to come back in 5 days to make sure that it's working the way it's supposed to, because there's a delay, and you sometimes need more than just a couple hits on something to know if it's working. Well, then you forget and come back a month later and realize it didn't work from the time you made it. So the testing view can really help with that. The other thing, before I start getting into actual useful stuff, is anybody using or enjoying real-time analytics? I love real-time analytics because I hate real-time analytics. Let me open up here. So if anybody, let's see, there's a couple of you on my demo site right now. So here's the thing about real-time analytics, right? They're fun. It's neat to look at people live on your site doing stuff. That's cool. But here's the thing. How many of you have the ability in real time to deal with issues that arise if you see it on here? If you cannot react in real time, seeing the data in real time isn't very useful at that point. Now, that's not always true. Yeah, go ahead. Yep, on the nose. That's exactly where I was going with this. I realized I keep walking over here, and we've got the little camera, so I keep walking out of frame for the folks who are live streaming. Sorry, people live streaming. I'll try to stay over here a little bit more. So yes, that is exactly the perfect use of real-time analytics, is when you do make those filters or set up those goals, you can come over here. So let's see what y'all are doing with some event tracking. A lot of reading happening because that's just the default action. Somebody actually clicked on breadcrumbs. I'm a little bit impressed. I'm honestly surprised. We've got button links showing up there. I've got a couple buttons on the site, like the request info button. I can come in here and see that. So I can say, yeah, request info, boom. So this becomes very, very useful when you are testing, especially because of this whole tag manager loop that we're going to get into. It used to be that if you wanted to do something like event tracking, what did you do? You wrote JavaScript, you use jQuery, whatever you wanted to bind, click actions and stuff to elements. You deploy your JavaScript and then you go test it. For me, that's kind of a laborious process because I work in an environment that has continuous integration, code review, all of this stuff. So I can't just change a file, FTP it up, and see what happens. There is a period of time that I have to go through before I can actually test that code on a site. It's not a lot of time, but it's more than what it was 10 years ago when the only person I answered to was me. And if I broke it, well, I chastised myself. But with Tag Manager, you can do that because there is no code deployment, and they have a preview mode built into the tool. So you can go in, make your tag, come right in, not only use their preview mode, but you can come into real-time analytics and see what's happening. There's one other good use case for real-time analytics, and that's for a real-time event. Perfect example for a university, commencement, right? Knowing that people are coming to your site and going to the commencement page, or not, as the case may be. You may notice, and this is where like reacting in real time becomes valuable. If you were to go to your real-time analytics and see that, yeah, people are going to the commencement page, but they're going to 2 other pages way more than that before they get there, you might realize, oh, we haven't made our call to action to watch the live stream big enough or obvious enough, or it's too far down the page, so people are taking a long time to get there. That's another good use case. Emergencies, inevitably we have some kind of emergency on campus. It doesn't have to be a big one, but it's something where we care about getting information out to a lot of people really quickly, and we want to be sure they're getting that. That's another good time to use it. I do know some folks that get like the digital wall, and they'll just project it up on the wall, like this exact report up onto the wall, just so it's running. It's fine, but outside of that, it really kind of has limited purpose for me. let's see. Let's go back to here and see what I had next. So Tag Manager. So the few of you that were at High Ed Web know that I have a certain soft spot in my heart for Tag Manager. I fell in love with that tool from day one, and it has only gotten better over the past year. The releases they have done with features have really made this tool so much better. If you are looking to use Tag Manager in WordPress, there is a really, really great tool that makes it pretty quick and easy. Duracell Tom, that's his name, right? Tom? Yeah, Tommy. The Google Tag Manager for WordPress plugin. I do have it installed on my demo site, though I am using my code to include the tag. The reason I did that is, one, because I wanted to show you kind of what this does without it duplicating. That would cause duplicate stuff to happen. They would include it twice if I did that. But this is a great tool, even just to get started with, get your feet wet without having to go in and edit code and do all this stuff. It comes, though, with a bunch of really neat built-in stuff. You can get really into the weeds, both with analytics and Tag Manager. It's very easy to do. And they have included a few really handy utilities that, well, you just saw with the, did y'all see with the event report in real time, all those reading categories that were coming up? Those were all being populated by this plugin. It has event tracking built into the plugin that says, hey, this person has loaded this page or this article, you know, they've gotten to the bottom of the page, and it sends out kind of a beacon. It uses that data layer that I talked about at the start. I know I'm talking a lot about stuff, but I'm not showing a lot yet. So let's try to do that. Let me make sure. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, let's get into some useful stuff. How's that sound? Okay. So, for argument's sake, we all have a Google Analytics account. We know how to get the ID for the analytics profile that we want to use, and we want to put it on our site and get things started. Using Tag Manager, this is how it works. You get a container. So I should mention this view of Tag Manager, if I can hit back without it. Oh, there we go. Is very similar to analytics. They use what are called sites and containers, but it's a very similar structure to that idea of properties and views. And so in this case, you can see I've got one for my main site, one for my gaming site, and then the one for this example, plus some others for other stuff. In fact, the one there at the bottom, the OUTC 17, was from this talk and on the update. So when you come in, you get your workspace. And the workspace is exactly what it sounds like. It's where you do stuff and see what's been done. To get started, the basics of Tag Manager work on 3 levels. It uses what are called variables, triggers, and tags. There are a ton of different variables, a lot of them built in, and you can also specify many of your own. In this case, we'll be using a variable called a GA settings variable. Those are then attached to triggers, which are exactly what they sound like as well. A trigger is giving you a condition to do something. In the case of page tracking, we're going to say all pages. And then we have the tag, and the tag is the meat and potatoes. It's what happens. So for basic page tracking, we go into our variables, and we see the built-in variables at the top. These are things that Tag Manager just knows entirely on its own. But I had to come in here and make my default settings. Now, Tag Manager, at first, this will be very empty. And you just hit the new button, and you get a blank slate, basically. You click into your center, and then you get all of the types of variables you can make. Once you've played with this for a while, you'll find stuff like the custom JavaScript variable is very useful. And I've got a use case in here that we'll take a look at in a little bit of how we make use of that. So in our case, I said, let's make a GA settings variable. And they ask you, what's your tracking ID? So I put my tracking ID in there. Fun fact, you can put a variable in there. So if you have 600 sites, and each one uses its own analytics, or if you have 4 sites and they each use their own analytics, you can have what's called a lookup table that says, if the page host name is this, use this ID. If it's this one, use this one. If it's anything else, default to another value. We use this real heavily at work. I use it for my development and staging environments, so that if you go to dev.aquent.com, I use one tag, but it knows to use my development analytics profile or property as opposed to my production one. If you go to our staging environment, it uses my staging property. And then if you go to production. But we can just as easily use it for the domains, subdomains, and whatever the case may be. I'll give you an example of that too. So I'm going to copy this. So the little Lego block looking dude, that's what lets you put stuff into these fields. So let's say I've got 27 different profiles here I need to deal with. Say let's deal with that. I want to make, I think behind this, I want to make a new one. We're going to call this better. Call this analytics profile IDs. I'll put this into my tracking folder. And then I want a lookup table. So the first thing it asks you is, what is the input for the lookup? Since we're going to change this based on the site we're on, we're going to use the page host name. Then I'm going to add a row, and I'll say if you go to WPCampus 17.fienen.com, use that ID. Now, we can obviously add a lot more rows. I don't have any because I don't have any other sites, but you could add in, if you hit plus instead of minus, WP Campus 17. Oh yeah, you're right, it is 2017. See, I wasn't even doing it right to begin with, so I would have broken it. Add row, put your next one in there. You can then set a default value. For instance, if you have 4 views, 3 of which are used once in a while and then one that's used most of the time, you can just set the one that's used most of the time to the default and it'll use that. But with that, you now have a lookup table. I save this and it automatically sticks it into my field and says, now whenever I fire this tag, or this trigger rather, I'm going to look at, I'm going to first look at which ID I should be putting in there. The cookie domain is set to whatever you need it to be. It's auto by default. This gets into the tracking of multiple sites and whether or not you need that cookie to be shared. If you also need, one of the big things is the allow linker. Allow, there it is. That's part of the deal that helps transfer sessions between sites. If you're tracking multiple sites on one property, you can set all those fields on here. This is basically just a collection of all of the settings that you used to write out in a chunk of JavaScript on your page. You could just type them in here in plain text. I added a custom dimension down below in index number 1. I tell it what visitor type you are, which is something that we'll get into here in a few because it's something a lot of universities don't do, and I want to show you how to do it. We set everything up. There's not really anything else here. I'm not using any of the other stuff, e-commerce tracking. You've got your cross-domain stuff down here. So you could say, yourschool.edu and, colleges. You could set up all the domains that you want linked together there. Basically, everything you can set in Google Analytics is respected within all of these properties. I'm not going to go through all of them because we simply don't have time to go through all of them. Okay, so we save this. That's step one. We have our variable. In the most basic sense is just an ID. Then we need a trigger. In our case, the trigger already exists because we're going to use all pages, but this is a list of the triggers I've made, and we'll look at several of these here momentarily. But we're going to use the default trigger of all pages, which is built in. And then I have my page view tag, GA page views. And it tells you here, I want a universal analytics tag. I want it to track a page view, and I want it to use my settings. And that's it. Oh, and then the triggering is down here below. I tell all pages. When you edit this, hit your plus sign, you get your list of all the things that you can make this trigger on. Obviously, for page views, we want to just do it when a page loads. With that done, we can close all this out, have it saved. I can open up preview mode, which is a fun little feature. It says you're now previewing it. Fun fact, if you work with marketers or another college or whatever, and they say, well, we want you to put this code on the page. We're doing this right now. We're installing OLARC for live chat on our site. And rather than building OLARC into my theme code or a file include, I've included OLARC in a tag with Google Tag Manager. And so with that, I can take the preview as I slide my little picture around. And this share preview link gives you a link you can send somebody that will enable what we're about to see so that they can go in and test that before it's gone live, which is extremely useful. So let's see, we come over here, demo site. So here's my fancy demo site. I know most of you opened it up already. If I refresh it, watch at the bottom. Nope, you can't watch at the bottom because I did this in incognito. So I'm going to share this preview with myself. Copy. And it'll tell you it's enabled the preview mode. Now when I refresh, watch what happens at the bottom. So it pops up this panel that tells you everything Tag Manager is doing in great detail. And we can even see it if I make it bigger. So we can see 3 tags fired by default. A tag called the Form Abandonment Listener, a tag called Reader Engagement, and then the tag I just showed you, which is GA Page Views. You can click on that and see it fired an analytics tag. Here's all the information that it sent along with it. You can see your tracking ID right here. And then using that dreaded real-time analytics, oops, not with that one though. And a couple of you are obviously on the page too, I'm sure. One of those 2 that's looking at the home page is me. If I go in and look at, let's pick a specific page. Go away, panel. I don't like you. Come on. There we go. Yeah, it's right in the worst possible spot. Let's look at the contact page here. So again, same 3 tags fire because those tags fire on page view. And now there you can see my contact there at the bottom. So again, using real time is great for verifying that what you're doing is indeed working right. Because obviously a tag can still fire and be broken. It doesn't know if it actually got the data to analytics. It just know it did what you told it to. So this completes the loop and lets us see. I put analytics in the Tag Manager. I told it to view a page, and now I can see that page is actually showing up in here. Let's see. Yeah, and now you have data happening. That's the long and short of it. The other 2 tags you see firing, we'll see here in just a little bit. The Form Abandonment Listener is exactly what it sounds like. I've written a tag that says on my forms, or specifically my request info and my contact forms, I want you to bind to that thing, and I want to know if people aren't using it or start using it and then stop using it. Think about something, because my forms are really simple examples, but I want you to think about, like, your request information form. How many fields? Green plaid shirt guy. How many fields do you have on your request information form? Financial aid forms, online application forms, my God. Now, they have to have those fields. I get that. But wouldn't it be nice to know if people are getting halfway through those forms and giving up so that you could try to do something about it? So the form abandonment listener will be really cool. And then the reader engagement is the one that is being built out by that plugin I showed you earlier and is feeding data. And I said, okay, let's listen to that data and show it in here so I know if people are scrolling my pages and are using the deal. Yes. Yes. This particular plugin doesn't do that. It times you based on how long you're looking at the page and if you get to the bottom of the content and the bottom of the page. There are variations on this, and I have some resources at the end of all of this that I'll share. There are some other examples that will do things like beacon out a percentage, and it'll say they got 30% down the page. And so that's a very cool way of doing it too. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, very similar. Mm-hmm. It takes a little bit of effort. First things first with Google Analytics, and this is true for anybody, and I'll show this because it is very important actually. You never, ever want to include personally identifiable information in Google Analytics. No emails, no names. They are really picky about that. And so in your view settings, you can actually have it exclude specific URL parameters. We do that because we have a whole lot of emails and stuff that bring information into our pages, and we don't want that into our deal. Plus, it makes unique views for each person when they're all viewing the same page. Yeah.
Tracking downloads, completion of downloads files.
Mm-hmm.
For tracking downloads of different file types.
Right.
And way back when we started the project, event tracking was still, it wasn't as advanced as this, and we were not able to discern a completed download file or differentiate. We were just looking around at the things, but we couldn't get it to do what we wanted to do. I ended up having to write a query. I used the download now in the plugin, and I have to write a query that's accurate and it tracks the individual downloads. And we're able to see whether a download is completed with an error and get the active website like that. We also use Google Analytics as like a heat map for where on the site everything people are going and safety and stuff like that. Like I'm sure we're not married to the system, and I wonder if we're going to be expanding our site yet again. Is it possible to use this for downloads, say giving tag managers tag a different type of file, like a PDF or an EPUB or a tar file, that type of thing, and then show that the download has completed, as opposed to somebody clicking on it and, no, I don't want this, I'm going somewhere else. That type of thing.
So yes and no, like all things. And I will apologize to everybody in advance too, because analytics, tag manager, all of this stuff is massive. And if you don't stump me with a question, I will be shocked, frankly. And the folks that I'm going to talk about at the end of this are light years smarter than me. You're getting like budget guy here. To answer your question though, yes, you absolutely can track different file types, no problem whatsoever. But to track them from a did they finish standpoint, that's the gotcha, because there isn't anything transactionally that happens on the website itself to say that. You would have to have, like, there are utilities, for instance, like, and a lot of like file sharing services will use something like this, where they will actually download the file into your cache first, and then once it's complete, then it just kind of shows up. You know, it says, okay, your download is now ready, and you click the button, and it just is done and saved on your computer as a file. You would have to do something like that so that you have an event to bind to that says, okay, we got through all of that data, and now we're willing to say the person has it. If it's just a traditional file download, I click it and it triggers the little save as dialog and all that. Once you're in that user experience and workflow, from the website end, they have no way of knowing unless you do something on the server side, you know, bind to the log files, something like that. And that gets really gnarly at that point.
That's what the plugin does. And again, I'm always like, I'm not a plugin and write a query against it. It's been working for 4 years. What is it does that, it binds and it goes against the log file and it notes errors, like if something is just incomplete and stuff like that. But it'd be nice to have it kind of like everything all together again. Right now we use Google Analytics for kind of a general overview of tracking and stuff like that, and then we use this system that I'll talk about tomorrow that does the download. But it would be great if Google Analytics could do that. But I can see why it would. So wait, and I'm very interested in this.
Yeah, that's a hard loop to close. And I would go back to what I started with real early on, which is it's always good to know stuff, but attach the value to it as well. So it's like if I need to know that people aren't finishing downloads, I need to figure out what the value in knowing that is in part. So because if nobody is coming to me and saying, well, we just never get those files, then that's a pretty good idea that people are getting what they want. Or, you know, especially at the university, kids are really quick to complain, and so are faculty about anything not working right. But to look at events, I've got a whole bunch here that we can start digging into. For starters, I have kind of in the middle here, let me get, yeah, these are sorted by name. The fourth one down, I have GA Generic Event Tracker. I use that for kind of a catch. So that trigger is always listening for me to send something to the data layer that says fire an event. And I want that event tracked in Google Analytics. So I don't have to write a custom tag for every event if I can just push something to the data layer. I do that, that's the one place where we break the pipeline a little bit, because that usually means I am writing something in my JavaScript. But I like the data layer because it's very agnostic. You know, if we stop using it, it's just a variable. It's not bound. It's not importing files. It's not, you know, bringing in another 100 kilobytes of JavaScript for something else. So it sits there and it listens. And then I've got all of these other things. The breadcrumb clicks. We saw that with the real-time analytics. I say listen for links. Same thing with button clicks. The form submission. It's listening for form submissions and says to do something. So to set something like this up, and I'm a big fan of this. I'm just going to, I will put this out there. I want events on literally everything on my site, because you can always look at, let's say, the navigational summary. Are folks familiar with a navigational summary in Google Analytics and what that looks like? So if you're looking at a page, let's look at my karaoke page here. Let's actually go into the right report. If you're looking at a page, we use just whatever's there. You can say, okay, 24 people looked at my page here, but I want to know how they got there. Up here in the tab, you've got your navigational summary. And this will tell you where people came from and where they went. In this case, I can see it has a 4% exit rate, which is amazing, actually, especially for a fake page. And then it has all of the previous pages. But here's the problem. It's telling you from whence they came, but not how they did it. So, for instance, I have, if I go to the catalog page, I've got 100 level courses. Actually, this was a terrible example. I shouldn't have done that. Let's go to the home page. Better example. So I've got news. I've got new lab opens shows up here twice because of the way the theme pulls in popular news. So I've got it right here, and then I've got it down here in latest news. If I click on that, it's going to tell me, hey, people came to this news article from the home page. Awesome. But which one did they use? Analytics doesn't tell you that. They used to have the in-page analytics. But if you ever used in-page analytics, which if you'd notice is, if you've used analytics a while, it's not there anymore. They've gotten rid of in-page analytics. It had the exact same problem because it only paid attention to the URL. So if you had, like, your logo was linkable, and then just like I've got here. So I've got a logo, but then I've also got home, and 30% of people clicked that, you'd actually see 30% on both of them because it didn't distinguish the elements. It only distinguished the URL. Events let me break all of that down so I can distinguish between things. I really love it for making large groupings of stuff like the buttons, or in this case, the breadcrumbs. So what I do is I say, because I hate breadcrumbs, if you were around in 2010, 2011 at High Ed Web, there was a big fight. I used to write for a blog called .edu Guru, and I got into a bit of a Twitter fight with Jared Spool over whether or not breadcrumbs were useful. I lost that fight for what it's worth, like you do. So in here, I make a trigger, and I say it's a click trigger. Click triggers are right over here. You can make it on all elements or just links. In this case, all my breadcrumbs are links, so I limit it to that. I say just links. But I only want some links. I don't want all the links on the page. I just want my breadcrumbs. So how do I do that? I say, look at my click element, and I want to see if that element matches a specific CSS selector. In this case, the trail items A. Any CSS can go in there. You can use all kinds of different matches. Equals, contains, you can use regex in there, you can use starts with, ends with, to figure out if you want something to trigger on that element. I make that trigger, I say, okay, now I want my tag. So I have a tracking tag for just that, and I say, again, we're going to use Universal Analytics. And then I say, what's my track type? Remember when we started, I said page view. But this isn't a page view. I want to track an event. So I say event. Then you get all of your event stuff. Now this, again, in JavaScript, remember, you had to write something that sends the event push, includes category and label and action and all of these things. Here, it's just fields. You just fill them out. I make a category. Can be whatever you want. In this case, I use breadcrumbs. The action's a click. And then I use a variable that's built in called click text. So it sends the text of whatever was just clicked into my report. Non-interaction hit is false for this, and then I include my setting, the exact same settings variable, so it knows which property to send it to. And now I can come into my events report and see all my categories, including my breadcrumbs category. And as we click in, and I can switch it over to label, and I can say, okay, I want to see, not my labels, I did the wrong, oh no, that's right, yeah. I was in content groupings. Now I can see what breadcrumbs people engaged with the most during that visit, or during those visits. I do this with everything. I do it with my breadcrumbs. I do it with my menu items. I do it with buttons, obviously, as you saw. Yeah.
Hopefully this is the easy one. The use case I have is I want to know if the link is the domain of our own.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know someone's domain.
Yeah. So you want to know if it's an outbound link.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a look at that, shall we? Sometimes I plan ahead well. Once in a while. So in my case, let me show you. Go back. God dang it. I hate Macs. For anybody, I see a lot of Macs in here. I hate them with a passion. Unfortunately, this is what work gives me. So I have two sets of outbound links on my page. Up in this upper right corner, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then again at the bottom, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Yeah, I want to know, are people using those? Are they leaving my site and going to look at that? Now, it doesn't have to be social. It could be anything. A link in an article, let's say. Part of that, the trigger would be interesting, and there are a lot of ways to go about it. Like you could say, use the doesn't start with, and then put your domain in there, or it doesn't start with HTTP whatever, and then put your domain, because sometimes even our internal links will get our domain on it. So I would set up a trigger that would basically say if the link is going away and matches anything that isn't us, that's outbound. So I can come back into here and I should be able to find, nope, 6 of 6. Let's see. So we'll use our handy dandy real time. Say this, I want to double check. Should have, yeah, social outbound. So I've got this tag down here towards the bottom, social outbounds. This is what I'm going to look up for you. I track the click text to give me a network name. Oh, that's why I'm tracking this as social. I changed it. I apologize. I moved this in the social report. Actually has a very specific area for social interactions, and since these were social media links, I changed it. That's why it doesn't show up there. But I could just as easily change this, though. I could say, let's make this an event. We're going to call it outbounds. Click. And then we're going to use the click text. I believe that's got a hidden text wrapper on it. So I've just changed my social outbounds. I'll save it. Whenever you've made a change to a tag and you're in preview mode, make sure you refresh. And now, nope, over here. Let's, anybody who is on the site, go to our demo site and go click one of those social media links. Actually, hold on one second. Michael did a dumb. Let me actually save this because you guys are not in preview mode. Now do that. Refresh and click one of the deals. So we should see in this report, I see somebody loaded the page. Somebody got to the bottom. They were also identified. The fun fact, the reader identified is determined based on how long you look at the page and either labels you as a reader or a scanner. And just for fun's sake, I'll come in here and refresh too. And you could see that one was super quick. Let me try. I'll show you that one in a second. Let's see. So there's my outbounds. And you can see 3 of you have clicked one of the outbound links. So now I'm tracking those as outbound links rather than social links. But yeah, you could do that for anything on the site if it goes anywhere and no people are leaving. Mm-hmm. Just in general. Yeah. Okay. So in this case, let's make a new tag, shall we? Or wait, nah, we don't need to do that actually. Let's do this. Let me let that thing go away. Okay, so let's look at our page. So I mentioned how there can be multiple ways to get to somewhere, right? So this will kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So I've got this slideshow in the middle, and I just had a link to the students page and to the faculty and staff page. Now, you can go to faculty and staff up here, or you can use this read more link. 2 links going to the exact same page, but I want to be able to distinguish, because if I go to that report we were looking at, let's look up our faculty and staff page. So there's faculty. We see 31 people looked at our page. We open up Navigational Summary, and I see 19 people came from the home page. But that's all I know. I don't know if they used the centerpiece. I want to know though, right? Because I hate centerpieces with a passion. I hate centerpieces worse than I hate real-time analytics, because centerpieces are a god-awful waste of space and effort. The data supports me every inch of that, I swear. Yeah. Well, guess what I can show you? So you can come into here. What I've got is a set of slideshow tags. And I've got 3 of them actually. So right down here, I've got one tracking the nav, which is the back and forth arrows. I've got one checking the pager boxes. That's the little numbers at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And then I've got one tracking the read more link. Now, I could cram all those into one tag. I choose not to because I like breaking them down separately. So let's look at our read more tag, right? So this is what I'm saying, label it. And here I'm actually mixing text with a variable. So I want to know read more what? And because it just says read more, which again is terrible accessibility, don't ever make a link just say read more. I throw the URL on there so I know which read more button they're clicking. Everything about this is the same otherwise. Slideshow, click, and then my trigger, slide CTA click. And I say, I want this trigger to fire when the click classes. So in this case, because I don't use these classes anywhere else in the theme, I just say if it has the class slider button in it, then that's going to be right. And I also added an extra one that says I only want to do this on the home page, even though I don't use it anywhere else. But an example of you can chain together events. So then I can come in here. So we know, let's take a look here. So we said 19 people came from the home page out of 31 total views. And we want to know how many people used the menu versus using this slider. So I come into my events. And we know, again, I called this, I think it was it slider or slideshow? I can never remember. I called it slideshow. So lo and behold, here I have a slideshow category. And I'm gonna, not my primary. Well, primary is fine. And I can see there on number 4, it's tracking read more, and there's my faculty link, 3 people. So now I know how many people came from the homepage, 19, and only 3 of them did it using my slideshow. This is a demo site and only 3 people used it. That's how crappy slideshows are. I can't even fake data into that. Everybody uses the menu. That's how it works. And so you can build this data up, and I love it with slideshows because now you have ammunition to go to people and say, let's get rid of the slideshows. It's extra JavaScript, it's extra code, let's do away with it. It's a great way to show how ineffective those are. But here, and this is everything, so because it's on my group slideshow, I didn't filter it by action. The pager boxes, 1 and 2, the previous and next buttons on there. Odd previous I used more than next, but that gives you a full look at how people are using that slideshow, and through that extrapolation I can compare, okay, and now I know exactly how many people used my menu item on that page. Right. Yeah, because they have the same link. The only way you could do it is if you added stuff to the URL, like a, and you'll see this on certain sites, like they'll add like a, source equals menu or something into the URL. It doesn't functionally do anything, but because it changes the URL, it creates a new row inside of Google Analytics. I think that's kind of lazy. No offense to anybody that might be doing that, but I mean, there's a better solution that doesn't take any extra work basically using this. You just have to know how to go in and read an events report basically. I didn't make a menu, or did I? Maybe I did make a menu tag for this. I usually have one for menu. No, I don't. I was working on the other stuff. you can see most of my stuff is ending up in the reading category because it fires like 4 events per page view. So you will see that buttons will grow. Here's, as an example, what that looks like in practice. So this is the company I work for, Aquint. We serve, what, 500,000 sessions a month or something. And pretty much all of this is now coming from Tag Manager and allows us to track in bulk everything across our site. So anywhere there is a button, you can see we've tracked 18,000 interactions with buttons across our site. And so I can go in there and see which buttons people are clicking on. Secondary dimension. So this is where single dimensional stuff isn't good. So I can switch and add a secondary dimension. So I see event category, and now it's broken down by label. And now I can see loading. The loading one is actually funny because it's being captured by our Ajax. Our jobs page loads more. And so when you click on it, it changes the text to loading. You can fix that with a filter for what it's worth. Apply now, learn more. You can see one of our Japanese sites comes up in there. I have no idea which button that is. Then a French button underneath that. But it lets me, I could go in there, I could break this down by page so I can see which pages these buttons are on and get all of that information to see which buttons are being interacted with. Where this gets really useful is places we have multiple buttons. So the same problem, like what you were asking about. Our jobs have an apply button at the top and the bottom. Okay, we have 2 buttons. How do they perform though? And so while we were just looking at this buttons category, I made a second category that also fires called job details, I think. Job details. Click, yeah, sorry, click. And I should see, there we go. So I've got my apply now buttons broken out because again, they both say apply now. So I can't look at my button event report because it's just going to say somebody clicked a button called apply now. So it's a similar problem to the linking issue. So here I made a separate one that says I want to track my apply buttons, but also attach the class name from it so I know specifically which one it is. And I can see the top and bottom are actually pretty close, 39 versus 53%. I mean, that's not a huge gap in terms of usage. And obviously the bottom one is being used more, which is good because it means people are reading our job description, then clicking apply. And so it gives me user information about what to do. I gave a talk actually 2011, 2012 on data-driven design. And it was all about this exact stuff and looking at an analytics report to make decisions about what I was going to change. And this is how you come to those decisions. If I saw my top button had a 5% click rate, I would really question whether or not it's worth spending the space on it. And that helps me make that choice and learn how my users are using my site and not what I think they should be doing. Okay, I'm running a little tight on time and I still have a ton of stuff to look at. Okay, let's change gears just a little bit off the event stuff. I want to talk about goals before we go anywhere else. Everybody has goals on their site, right? Does anybody not have a goal set in analytics, or do they not know how to set a goal? Okay, a few of you. So goals are a measurement way, right? A way to know if people are doing what you want them to do. So that might be request information, right? Request information is a goal, isn't it? You want students to come to your site and say, I am this person, I'm interested in this, send me stuff so that you can try to get their money. I mean, basically, that is what it comes down to. It might be signing up for an event, right? You may have a student, great example, student, the thing where the new students come in. Orientation, thank you. Hey, it's been a while since I've been in college, okay? You may want to know that the kids are actually going to your event page and signing up for orientation. Now, obviously, you probably have other ways of knowing that, but it's a good example of getting somebody from point A to point D. And so what we can do is get out of here. So when you look at your site administration over here on the right, every view has a set of goals. And you can come in here and I believe it's 25 is still the limit. You have 5 goal sets, and each goal set can have 5 goals. Now, it's designed in such a way that you should make them group together. I know a lot of folks like subscribe to the idea of macro goals go in goal set 1, micro goals go in goal set 2, and interactional goals go in goal set 3 or something like that. It's up to you. The thing about goals is once you've made them, you can't get rid of them. You can change them, but you can never, like, I can't delete this request information goal now that it's in there. I can always make it into something else, but you do need, and this is, remember when I said at the very start, a lot of analytics happens before you come into the tool. This is why. It helps to kind of plan out some of this. So I can see right here that I've had 6 goal conversions, that it is turned on. I can turn it off and make it not record anything. And I can click into it. They give you a bunch of templates ahead of time. I don't use them because I don't think it's necessary. They're okay, but custom goals are very easy. So in this case, I just said I need to go somewhere. So I'm calling it request information, and the type is a destination. I want you to end up somewhere on my site. Some other ones, like they've got here, duration, pages, or events. So a lot of things, again, if you're transactional, you were talking about downloads, for instance, I can make an event goal that says if you click a button to download something on my page, well, that doesn't take you anywhere. But if I know you clicked that download button, I know you did what I wanted you to do. And so you can make it be an event and set up conditions for that. And then my details are, I want you to end up on a page that's request information. And then in this case, this CF_SU, I'm using Caldera Forms on the site. And that's the start of their success page. So I know you've hit their success. The form was submitted properly. And then I also said, I want a funnel. So in this case, not only do I want you to request information to end up on my page, but I want you to do it a very specific way. I want you to go to my catalog, then go into one of the catalog sections, and then click into or a class page, and then click the button. Not all goals have to be that rigid. You can make that not required if you want to. But what this does is it allows you to then visualize this in the report, and you can see where people are dropping out of your funnel. This is really useful. Let's go back to this idea of applications. How many of you have a multi-page student application for college? Nobody? One? Usually somewhere you will find, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Let me ask just a secondary question. How many of you in here are using WordPress for your core.edu site as opposed to like the news and other sections? So a few of you. Okay.
And as far as applications go, yes, the actual apply for college is in some sense, like in the CRM system outside WordPress. But we do have applications that are express interest in this program. I want to be a student worker for a rec center. Those are all in WordPress, provided that they're not asking for information. We really try to educate people.
Right.
Not asking for student ID.
Yeah. So these required funnels are really good for multi-page forms because you do want to know where people are dropping out of your site. In this case, this is not a great use of it, but I wanted to just give you an example. Then you can verify the goal just to make sure that you've done it right. And you can see I would have had, because I don't have a lot of data, 21% conversion rate. Always verify those goals before you've saved them, just to make sure that you've set it up right. Once that's done, we can come in here to the bottom at conversions and look at my goals. and I can see that people are doing what I've asked them to do. I've had 7 completions of that goal funnel. Now, with this, you'll notice my goal value is at $0. And one of the first things I said was try to assign a value to that. When you set up this goal, you can give the goal a value and say, whenever somebody completes this, it's worth X dollars. It doesn't have to be an absolute 100% accurate amount, and it can be a relative amount, I've said. But try to find some value to assign to that so that you can compare and see how it goes. Now, you can get into these other reports here and see, these probably aren't going to visualize real well on this, but you can see I had some folks down here at the bottom come from Twitter to complete my goal, because I tweeted out my site a couple days ago to say, hey, go look at this demo site and click around and have some fun and just fill some stuff out so I have data that isn't just me. And I can see it's, I'm sure, really hard to make out on that screen up there, but go back. But there is this flow of where people are going. Here, wait, can I highlight? Yes. It's still not highlighted very well. This is extremely hard to explain from a pointing and showing. The better way usually is using the funnel visualization, because it shows where your drop-off is. So up top, you can see people hitting my catalog page. 7 people hit, 1 left. Then 6 of those got to the course page, 2 left. I'm down to 4, 1 left, and then 3 completed that entire funnel. So that gives you that visualization of where people are leaving those goal paths. Other goals. Yes. It depends on something like that, and I didn't plan to talk about this because a lot of universities don't get real into that, but there is an e-commerce component that you can enable for goals that adds in a bunch of monetary tracking for it. Now, what I tend to do is use like the event value type deal. You could pass a value through a JavaScript variable or something like that and sniff it out through Tag Manager or something like that and use that to populate your goal value. In the case like that, I would probably tie it into the e-commerce goal tracking, and then that will give you the tools that you need to then pull out the value, because it's kind of like a shopping cart transaction then basically, and it has a tool set designed specifically to work with a shopping cart type system, since those are kind of a very closed loop transaction. And thinking about multi-page forms, and again, this may not be something some of you have in WordPress itself right now, but one I think most folks can identify with, are net cost calculators on university websites, because almost none of those are single page, and they're overly complex, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes because schools are actively trying to get kids to not use them. That is a thing. But knowing if kids or parents are filling out your net cost calculator, because usually there's a transaction at the end of that, right? I want to contact the financial aid office. I want to get the information on scholarships, whatever the case may be. So there's a definite value to knowing if people are starting your calculator and finishing it at that point. Yeah. Oh, different problem. Some, though, is it a third-party tool? Is like the Noel Levitz calculator, or some of those. Now, I don't know if Noel Levitz does it, but I know some of them do offer analytics integration where you can attach stuff to it, but you're really limited. It's sometimes just like, give us your profile or property ID and we'll plug it in. They don't give you the whole Tag Manager support and all that, so it's a little limited. But as long as you are tracking it and you're getting like the page view hits off of it, you can build a report around it, because those pages will still show up. And at that point, You don't need Tag Manager for that or anything. You just need to go into your goal and say, I need people to hit this destination, whatever the iframe terminal point is, that's where they need to get to. And if the service that you use allows you to plug that in, that's what you would look for. If they don't, I would ask for it, because those are highly transactional, and everybody has to have one. Every university has to have a net cost calculator on their site, so it's important to know if it's working well for you, especially with as hated as they are. You know, there's all kinds of stuff swirling around about the accuracy of them and not necessarily wanting to show what your real cost is and all of this kind of stuff. So, okay. Gonna hit two more things very quickly, and then I'm gonna wrap up and try to leave some time for questions here. So, Mr. 600 Site Man, who here is using content groupings? Dear God, why do you guys hate yourselves? Content groupings, I think, is one of the most underutilized, powerful tools in Google Analytics, especially for a university. Now, I had a really nice example of this set up, and it was working 2 days ago, and now it's just not. So this is the point of the conversation where I can't show you the nice example I had set up. I can describe it, and I'll show you another case, but it's not as good. So content groupings are exactly what it sounds like. It lets you say, this part of my site is this kind of thing, news. These are news articles. These are catalog elements. These are departmental pages. And it allows you to view those in aggregate as a chunk, as opposed to like a listing of pages or a folder drill down. This is really useful for things like news. Think about news. How many here are using categories on news items? At least some of you. You can say, here's where our news is at, and these are departmental news items. These are event news items. These are award news items. And use, you know, your WordPress categories. You on something like that, you might have to, if you're not using like a URL parameter or something to say what category it is, you might have to push a chunk of data that you can read out. There are several different ways of making content groupings, and I'll show you the easy one, and the other ones I'm going to leave you guys to your own devices. So in my case, the thing I did that has stopped working, again, here under View, you have a section for content groupings. You hit this guy, and I've got one called Courses, and it says it's got 2 definitions in it. You are allowed up to 5 content groupings. Again, this is one of those important kind of weird limitations, but there are 5 content groupings, so plan them out ahead of time. In this case, I said I want to know courses, and then I have 2 groups within this content grouping. I said 100 level courses and 200 level courses, because that's all I put into the demo site. And then I made them user defined. So in this case, I say if the page matches a regex of /catalog /1xx, and then has a string after it, that denotes a course in my 100 level. So if we look at our site, our demo site, and I say catalog 100 level courses, and I look at Analytics 101, you can see my URL is a catalog /1xx /analytics-101. In theory, when I go look at my content report and select content groupings, I should see 100 level courses. I'm not. I will try it one more time, but I'm pretty sure it won't be there. All pages. So on your page report, but not in that account. Right above your table, you've got your primary dimension where you can change it to be pages, page titles, but then there's this content grouping option. And I can say, yeah, I want to see this done by courses. And it's going to say, okay, it's there. I don't know. It wasn't there before I started this talk. So, hey, look, content groups. It works. So the not set is everything else. Not set is all the other stuff that you aren't looking at. And then you see 100 level courses, 200 level courses. Those are group names I gave it. That's what you saw in the configuration. And it says we've got 30 total views of the 200 level courses and 19 total views of the 100 level courses. Think about this in terms of departmental websites. You can say, I have a content group of departments. And then each department, biology, art, physics, can be a content grouping underneath that. And you can see all of their stuff in aggregate then. Now, here's where stuff, remember I say chase context, not numbers. This is just a number. This just tells me how many pages got viewed. Have you ever switched your view over here along the right-hand side where they've got all the comparisons and pivot graphs and all that? This is where things can get kind of neat. So let's see how my courses are doing. I really like using the comparison guy over here. And this is page views. We don't want page views though. Single dimension, bad. I want to see how many people are exiting from these pages and see if any of them are doing badly. And oh God, they're doing terrible. So this tells me that across my entire site, not too bad, 7% bounce rate. But my God, what happens with my 200 and 100 level courses? People are looking at these courses and then just leaving the site. They aren't doing anything else. So that might be a problem. This looks really good. This is why I have my other account open. So this is my big site. This is all of us at Aquin. So I'm going to drill down here into just our US site. So here are our top content drill down areas. Actually, let's do this. Let's go all pages. How am I doing? I got 20 minutes. 15 minutes? So 15 minutes. So let's see here. I want to use any pages that are aquin.com. Okay, so I've got this report, right? Okay, I can see all my pages. That's cool. Doesn't tell me much. Let's see how it does. Not sorting by page value because that's dumb. Page views, comparison. And then, so again, we're single dimension still. So let's switch this over and let's see. Let's look at bounce rates. Now I can see of my top performing pages, when people look at our find work section, I'm looking at line 6, and they look at all jobs, got a 65% bounce rate. So people are looking at all jobs and then just leaving. They hit that page and are gone. That's probably because they're coming from one of our social media accounts that link into our job results or something like that. So that means whatever they are coming here for, they aren't getting what they need, even though it's one of the top hit pages on the site. But I can see, look at line 2. So I notice here just by a glance, almost all of our top 10 pages are find work pages. But look at number 2. Number 2 is also the find work index page before a search has happened. It has a 42% bounce rate. That's way better. So when people go there on their own, they bounce way less frequently than when they get there. It's like, what is it? It's actually 42% less than the average or whatever. They bounce 65% more when they hit from somewhere else. Now, I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what off the top of my head I can do with that information, but I know that that indicates a weird problem that I should look into more. I love this specific view, taking your pages and looking at them based on either bounce rates or exit rates. Ideally, we want people leaving us from job pages. That's where we want people to leave our site from. But if people are leaving, my God, look at the people leaving after doing searches on locations 11, 12, and 13. It's like, what are they not getting when they search those locations? I don't know what locations those are off the top of my head, but that tells me either they're not getting good results or there are no jobs maybe in those areas. And so I can look and see, maybe location 11 doesn't have any jobs posted right now, so they're just getting hey, we haven't found anything. So maybe I should recommend them something else. Maybe I should find a job close to them and say, here are some other options. But this is your starting point. This is your jumping off point. Then lastly, and then we will try to use up the rest of the time with whatever we want. I want to talk about custom dimensions because I promised that at the start. So we have, as universities, a lot of different audiences we serve. How many people on their homepage have an audience-based navigation? Alumni, students, faculty? Yeah. How many of you know how alumni use your site, though? If I said, tell me what pages your alumni look at the most, can anybody tell me what pages their alumni look at the most?
Sports.
Sports? Do you know that, or are you guessing?
Yeah, go with sports fonts.
Yeah. Is anybody using custom dimensions on their site at all? One. So one of the first places to start, identify your audiences. That's the first place to start. So that Tag Manager plugin, the WordPress plugin that is identifying readers, one of the first things, oops, wrong one. One of the first things I did was I bound that to a custom dimension. Let's show you how to set that up. That's a good starting place. So custom dimensions are defined on properties. So we're in the middle column here, down here at the bottom, custom dimensions. I've got two. I said I want to know visitor type and reader type. My visitor type is where I'm going to identify students and faculty. And my reader type is where I'm going to define if you're a scanner or, I think, reader. I think is what it uses. So we'll use that one first. And there's nothing to it. You just say what name you want it, and is it active, and then what scope you want. And I won't go too deep into scope, but it's basically you're going to be looking, depending on what you're tracking, either the hit, the individual page view, is it something you're tracking? Are you looking at your entire session, like how people are doing something over the course of their visit, or them specifically? Well, since people don't change from students to faculty, usually, we can probably be okay identifying them at the user level for that. Now, that is not always true, and my example is very simple here, but you can make it much more complicated. So let's look at our pages. And let's say I want a secondary dimension of reader type, and I want to know how people are using my site. Let's say, so this is showing a lot of scanners. My timing on this is really weird for how it detects them, so I get a lot of scanners. But let's say I want this where my reader type I think it's reader, if I remember right. Please be reader. Yes, it is. Great. Now I can see people are reading the home page, the faculty page, what is that, request information, and the success page. So if you are reading my site, if you are somebody who is really engaged with my pages, here's where you're spending the most time. This is kind of a proxy for the time on site metric for what it's worth, but not exactly, because I've defined it the way I want it. Likewise, we can change that and look at it the other way as scanner. And we'll see all the rest of the pages. Most people are scanning because they just scroll the page, do something, and go on. This works the same way, though, if we wanted to be more topical and know, are people looking at us as faculty or staff, or faculty or students? So here we can see, my favorite is actually, where is it, line, where'd it go, 10. 12 students viewed the faculty page. The way I am tracking this goes back to Tag Manager. So I've got a tag set up. Let's see, where is my page view? There it is. So remember I mentioned early on in this GA settings variable. Let me get back to it. I had a custom dimension set in it. Index number 1 I set to visitor type. And so something gets passed to that. If it doesn't have a value for it, it's blank. If I don't know if you're faculty or staff, it just ends up with nothing. So I'm not tracking any kind of negative value or non-topical value. So if I come down and look up my visitor type variable, this is way stupid. This is so basic. But what I've done is I've said, if you look at the faculty page, you're faculty. If you look at the student page, you're a student. And I use that as the means of identifying. That's a bad way to identify people because folks move around a bunch. But you could build on this exact kind of logic. What we're talking about at work is doing a confidence model, basically, and scoring our pages such that after you've looked at so many pages, then we try to determine based on, you know, are you a job seeker or a hiring manager? And you have a score of 80, you know, 80% hiring manager, 20% job seeker, we're pretty safe saying you're a hiring manager. And we can then use that. We would apply it to the custom dimension, and then we can serve them custom content, do whatever we need to from that point. If it's the other way around and you looked at 20 jobs, you're probably a job seeker. We would rate you high and use that as the custom dimension value for what kind of visitor you are. This is kind of like between the custom dimension and the content groupings, you can get so much value out of the actual people using your site then and what is producing results for you. And a lot of people don't dig into that or use this kind of information for, oh, I think my thing stopped. They're trying to kick me out early. Using this model to then feed into, we didn't even get into custom segments and using segments to identify groups of people based on sessions. Real quickly, I just want to mention it so that you know it exists, is when you look at your dashboards up here, dashboards and reports, and you get all these items, like I've got a site search report, I've got a VP digital dashboard, and custom reports, I've got all of these custom reports. I didn't make these, I imported these. There is a gallery that you can go to. Go download the Occam's Razor Awesomeness Pack. It's developed by Avinash Kaushik. It's a great starting place for getting pre-built segments and pre-built reports that you can look at and learn more information about your site.
How often do you, or what triggers closing the loop? Like, by that phrase, I mean, you're designing with, based on data feedback. If you take your best guess and you find out that the reality is, or your users are doing things in a way you didn't quite anticipate, is it, does that have to be written in the SOW for you to go back and to tweak things? You know, that button is useless, so let's take it out. How often do you go back? I mean, everything that you learned to date, you apply to new things, but you go back and modify recent work based on information you get after 6 months, after a year.
So, and this is where unfortunately I didn't get a lot of time. And I was really optimistic. I said, do I have time to talk about Google Optimize? Yes, I do. No, I didn't. Optimize is taking the place of like Google experiments and content experiments that they had in analytics. And it's a great way of like A/B testing changes and seeing the results, because those, you make changes and then you attach it to a goal and you see how it impacts that goal. And Optimize puts out a report for you that says, we think this option is this much better than this one. We have a weekly analytics meeting at work. We sit down, we have a set of reports that we look at. We look for problems. We look for, you know, numbers that are out of whack. We've got alerts that we have running that we see, you know, did Twitter social referrals drop by 20%? Well, we want to know about that, and let's see why. So in this case, with Optimize, what I recommend is always have one experiment running, and like we let ours run for 2 weeks. What we did was we had a menu item that we weren't sure was performing well, and so we made a change to that menu item so it used different language and it didn't have a drop down. It was a case of a menu item with one link under it, with one drop down. So it's like, let's just move that up. And we improved, I forget what the total improvement was off the top of my head, but it was a definitive, after 2 weeks, our optimized experiment said it is 100% certain that is a better option. That it had collected enough data by that point that we were outside the margins of error at that point, that the margin of error did not have any overlap, and we were able to say, this is better. And so we use that, make a ticket, set it aside. When we get to that ticket, then we will make that improvement. and now let's look at the next thing and try to see what is and isn't working based on other data. You know, looking at goal conversions, looking at events. You know, I would say if I saw like the apply buttons had a big gap, I would say, okay, let's test. Let's see if removing the top apply now button improves conversions of the bottom one and improves overall goal conversions, and see if that helps. So it's about, there is a guess and check component to it, certainly, but we do it constantly. Now, we've got our internal team, so we have resources, and in our case, a lot more resources than a lot of campuses have, unfortunately, so we can have that luxury a little bit. But even for universities and whatnot, Optimize is another free tool, and it lets you do everything from just changing a word on a page to completely changing the layout and see what happens. And you can control how many people see that and you know how that's delivered. So always be trying to iterate on something. Always be measuring and adjusting. The worst thing you can do is build a site and leave it. I mean, that is the worst thing you can do. So always be trying to measure stuff and adjust and find problems, talk to people. I said earlier, find out what's important to them and see if you're meeting their goals and meeting their expectations. I've got 1 minute left, so I can get in about one more question. I know this was a little bit all over the place in a lot of ways, but I hope it at least clued you into some areas that we can get into. I'll be here the rest of the day. I'll be here all day tomorrow. I will be happy to sit down with anybody and show you stuff. If you're trying to solve a specific problem, please find me. I will be more than happy to show you how to build a report for it. Or if I can't, I will point you somewhere. These are great resources. Avinash, of course, Lunametrics. Simo's blog is fantastic for Tag Manager. Google Analytics Academy is a Google tool, great way to get, you know, a nice round understanding of things. And then they've got a YouTube account that is constantly pumping out little 3-minute analytics tips. That said, I hope this was 2 hours well spent for you guys. I appreciate y'all coming in and spending time with me.
Thank you.